Hello, hello, and welcome to episode 36 of Trails in the Pod. I'm Colin, that's Kevin.
Colin, do you know much about celebrated World War One French Prime Minister Georges Clemenceau and his relationship with the President of France, Raymond Poincaré?
No, Kevin, I know nothing about Clemenceau. I know less about the French president, but I am really interested to see where you're going with this.
They had a tumultuous relationship, especially at the Paris Peace Conference. Clemenceau was heard to remark, "There are two useless things, an appendix and Poincaré." And Colin, he was off by one. He should have said there are three useless things, an appendix, Poincaré, and Josette and Trails the Third.
I mean, I feel like I have to push back on you because recognizing that Josette is a useless unit in combat, they provided a use for her in the support system, which we will be talking about in this episode.
Yes, we will, because we have Josette in this episode. We have Joshua. We have Jamuller. All sorts of characters, all sorts of places come to Spooky Town, aka Grancel, as we discuss Chapter 2 of Trails the Three.
Trails the Three?
Yeah, keep the naming scheme going.
All right. Uh, so, yes, we beat Chapter 2. Kevin beat it a while ago. I beat it like yesterday because I'm streaming it, as you guys know, and I've been having a lot of fun with that. So we're going to be talking about that experience at the end because some of these boss fights were pretty tough. But as Kevin says, basically, Chapter 3, we're no longer in like this spiritual disembodied place. Instead, we're magically transported back to Grancel. However, there's some significant differences. For instance, there is no NPCs. There are none. There are treasure chests around in some known areas, like Fisherman's Guild, Bracer's Guild, different shops. So it's worth it to look around. But what is present are enemies, and also gates around specific areas, as if whoever is designing this place is walking the player, aka Kevin, not this Kevin, but Kevin Graham, guiding him along a very specific path. Kevin, what were your initial impressions when you saw that we were back in Grancel?
To be honest, I was a tiny bit disappointed. It's the fourth time that we've gone through the capital in the games. And it's a great city, it's a great series of maps, but I want something different. Like chapter 1, and hopefully the third chapter will be different as well. That kind of colored my impression. It was very linear, but I don't think that's a bad thing. It speaks to the guiding intelligence. The lack of NPCs, they wanted to give it a spooky aura, and I think they succeeded. But it also made it feel kind of dead and sterile. And maybe that was part of the plan. If even that's the case, that's not a great thing for a player to experience, even if it's intentional.
I see where you're coming from. I personally walk away from it feeling differently. So for one, it's pretty obvious that this game makes judicious use of asset reuse. By that, I mean we're revisiting old locations, but we have new scenarios in them, even to a point where even more than FC and SC. But I don't necessarily mind that. I like the fact that they designed maps for Liberal once and is managing to get mileage 3 games out of them. By having nobody around, what I found upon playing through it was that my reason for going into different areas was different. It was no longer, let me see what NPCs are here, let me see what stories are here. Instead, it was, let me see if there's any treasure here. Let me see if there's a moon door or a star door or a sun door, of which you find them. They're there. The game rewards you for exploring that way.
It's very different rationale, and it takes a bit of the role playing, at least for me, out of a role playing game without other people, so to speak, to bounce off against.
Sure, and we definitely need to discuss that because what I think that this chapter is really stressing, what my analysis is trying to stress, is that this is fundamentally a different kind of game compared to FC and SC. It's a dungeon crawler, and by taking what we know and converting it into a dungeon crawler, what that allows the player to do is explore the confines of that genre while still engaging with things that are familiar and loved. And that's what I really like about it, is that it's forcing me to experience these things again in a whole new way.
So, 20 seconds. Explanation. What is a dungeon crawler exactly?
Okay, for those who cannot see, which is everybody, he is now currently counting down the seconds on his hand. But the camera looks really choppy, so it's difficult to tell what second I'm on, but I've already wasted enough time. I don't really have a precise definition of dungeon crawler, but what I would say is that it is a genre of RPG that places more emphasis on the exploration in dungeons and combat in dungeons and the finding of loot, rather than exploring towns, overworlds, and having this big grand narrative. Obviously, there are narrative aspects to Trails in the Sky the Third, but gameplay wise, that's really not the focus. I've written down a summary of this chapter's plot. And normally, most of our chapter discussions are about the plot. This one is simple. Number one, mystery. Why are we in Grancel? Why is it empty? What happened to the royal family? Step two, more mystery. Why do we keep finding stones? Why are the ones in the stones chosen to be present? And then three, very partial answers during the interaction with the Lord of Phantasma. That is a summary of the chapter, and we'll talk more about the Lord of Phantasma part, but in terms of like what's actually here plot-wise, there's not much. But because the genre is different, I don't mind.
I understand where you're coming from, but the strength of the Kiseki series so far has been the rich world. And this is a different kind of game. They are to be applauded for branching out and taking some creative risks, but it feels less full, and that is a weakness.
In my opinion, it doesn't feel less full, but it's also because I've played through this before, and therefore I have experienced many of the doors.
I didn't feel this for chapter one when we were in the plane, alternate plane, whatever. But for some reason here in spooky Grancel, it seemed much more present.
I mean, I think that you probably feel this way because in chapter one, it's a new setting. We didn't know where we were. So exploring that was a pretty strong element of the plot. Whereas chapter two, it's the same thing again, but in a place you've already been. But what I do want to say is that the strengths of Kiseki that you like are present in this game, but they're present in a form that we haven't really engaged with yet because the way that we've decided to handle the doors is to play through the chapters, and then I'm thinking maybe we'll do chapter 2, chapter 3, then we'll go back and we will experience these doors. So like on stream I'll have door streams, which is going to take a while, but that's what we'll do. And then we'll have a sidebar discussing the doors. I know that you've done one of the doors. I haven't done any of the doors for chapter 2. And so, that's when we really start to see a lot of the world building because it's hidden away in these distinct areas.
I've done the Tita door from chapter one, and I thought overall that was good. And you covered that on your stream, I do believe.
Yes, yes.
And I did the Josette door for chapter two. And Colin, that door is as high quality as her character.
Well, were you playing on the Steam Deck or were you playing on the PC?
The Steam Deck.
So the problem with that door is that it does not work with a controller. It just doesn't. In order to get enjoyment out of that door, you need to use a mouse, which neither of us were using. I will be using a mouse for that door when I play through it again.
Oh no, the controls were fine. I had no issues at all with the shooting fighters minigame. It was the actual structure that was bantha voodoo.
That was bad for voodoo. Well, we'll have to talk about that once we have a sidebar on the doors, because I don't really remember the plot there. Why don't we talk about the units that we get, though? Because it's not just Josette that we got. We already know you don't like Josette, and neither of us actually tried her out in the party. But we got Mueller, and we've got Joshua that have also joined our party.
So we get Josette fairly early on, along with Mueller, and we get Joshua past the halfway mark, I'd say, about the 2/3.
I mean, we get Joshua 3/4 of the way through. All that's left after we get him is the palace. And we should note that in terms of like our party compositions, both of us have used Joshua. I did not use Mueller, and I don't think that you did either. So in terms of like, why don't you talk about Joshua? But you can also touch on Joshua as a unit.
Well, as a unit, he's phenomenal. His double attack, his evil eye, AT delay, great unit. As a character, I think it was a total abject mistake to include him. Bad move, unreserved, and I'm very concerned at the 99% chance Estelle's coming as well. Because in brief, their story is done for the moment. Their arc, not total, but it's in a great place the way we saw them the end of SC. Time to let them rest as characters, have adventures off screen. Just my worry is that Joshua and later Estelle will overpower, I guess, Kevin Graham. He's the titular, the ostensible protagonist, and it's tough to have him shine if we get the entire gang, or close to it, back together from the first two games.
Well, I will be curious to see how your opinion changes as the game goes on, because I don't think that they overshadow Kevin at all. You say ostensible protagonist. Kevin is the protagonist of this game. I think it's pretty clear at this point that we're getting a lot of characters from the other games. This is not something with a limited party. I mean, they literally have introduced a system in which you can have a crap ton of party members, and there's going to be a lot more. This is kind of a celebration game in that regard. But Kevin is the protagonist. The story is about Kevin. Estelle and Joshua have their moments, but they are not the focus.
Batter down the hatches, secure the doors, because let's go to the bunker and look at Kevin's predictions. So I made the prediction about familiar faces. Would we see any? I said Agate, Tita, maybe Shira will return. No one else. I think it's safe to say we have a verdict for that prediction.
You was wrong.
Decidedly so. We're gonna get Chloe and Zen. We have Joshua. We're gonna get Olivier and Estelle. 99.9% chance. Like you said, it's a celebration.
Like we kind of already know this too, right? Because when we find the doors give us requirements. Like bring us this person, and it's pretty easy to figure out who they are. So like one is like,
Is that a mistake?
no, I don't think so. I don't think that the game is trying to fool us. And at this point, the game is not trying to fool us into being like, oh, is this character going to be in here or not? I think it's safe to assume that the characters that we have seen are going to be here. And we know this because Zen has been foreshadowed in a door, Chloe's been foreshadowed in a door, Estelle has been foreshadowed in a door, Josette was foreshadowed in a door, and then you find Josette.
Not like a mistake as in, oh, you think it's A, but it's actually person B, but it takes away a bit of the mystery, doesn't it, of who all's been caught up if you go to a door and like, oh, I know who this is. I know another person who will join the party.
I don't think that it ruins the mystery, because then you're starting to think, okay, well, I'm going to get this person. When am I going to get them? And what it also does, this is kind of like in a Metroidvania, where you experience an obstacle and you don't have the tools to do that obstacle. And the game has trained you that you want to experience these doors for the story, and also for the monetary rewards. So then when you see, okay, in order to access this door, I need Zin. Well, now you're hoping that the next stone that you get is Zin, or is somebody else that you need for a door that you unlock. And then maybe you get them, maybe you don't. But once you get that character, not only is it, oh, cool, I have this character, I really like this character. It's also, oh, now I can go back to this door. And I think that's really effective.
I get that. My concern is what I don't want to happen is to have a door where I'm not sure, maybe spoiled is the wrong word or the right word. A major character I had no idea that would be joining, if that makes sense. Like, I know, oh, Joshua, like, I know who Joshua is. I'm not that surprised now to have him in the party, but if, say, Kanone or Cassius or whoever is going to come, I don't want that to be, oh, I've known this already from the door.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. And I could see the potential for the game doing that, but we'll see if that happens. Do we want to talk about the bosses?
Yeah, sure. So there's two bosses, and I didn't have that much difficulty with them, I found the second boss more difficult than the first. And I'm playing on Nightmare, and I do think there is a damage increase among everyone. So you're more brittle, so to speak, but you deal a lot more damage. But yeah, I have no idea if that's true or not. But
Sure.
I felt like my S craps and my arts did more than the numbers I saw on your second boss. I didn't have. I think I beat it in one, maybe two goes at most, because I did not try to use Tita. And first boss, I felt was fine, even though I was using Tita. But you had very different encounters.
Yeah, we have to talk about that. I did, and I don't think it's necessarily because of the difficulty. So some of it is, some of it definitely is, some of it is not. So let's talk arena boss first. The way that the arena boss goes is that first you have two waves of enemies, and then you fight the arena boss. And the arena boss, man, I'm even trying to like think through what he was. It's like I've blocked out this traumatic memory of him absolutely whooping my ass. What he does definitely have is a lot of AT delays and a lot of skills that hit an area of effect. So what I was finding was that if a character got hit, it was killing them. If not the first time, it was going to kill them the second time. And so then I'm trying to heal everybody up. I'm finding it difficult. Plus, with the AT delay, nobody's being able to take their turn. So it's just, it's a continual cycle of being unable to actually react to the boss and therefore unable to forward any plan to beating the boss.
One thing that you've talked about for your play style, you tend to use more craft than arts, and you're not as, you are forced now to be more calculating and strategic than you've been for the past two games.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there were two changes that I had to make in order to overcome that fight. The first was, frankly, I was underleveled. I was underleveled by two. And I know this because I went off to fight just a random mob, and I was getting 500 experience per fight. So definitely that was a factor. I had to level up from level 100 to 102. And then I was the correct level. What was annoying to me is that I was getting the boss down to like 4,000 at 100, so it felt like I could do it, but I just couldn't. But yes, absolutely. In terms of setting up, I had to start thinking about, okay, well, what role does Kevin play in this fight? What role does Julia play in this fight? Okay, what kind of quartz do I need to give them the bonuses to do that role more effectively? What kind of quartz do I need furthers that goal? Do I need them to have an HP 2 or a Mind 2? Is attack 2 necessary here, or do I need to put in something that increases or decreases the amount of time they take to do arts? More than that, too, it's, okay, I need to start thinking about specific spells that I need this character to have. So in order to beat the arena boss, for instance, our strategy was Kevin casting Earth Guard a lot. Earth Wall, sorry, in order to give everybody immunity. Because while he can do immunity through Grail Sphere, he's not going to get 200 CP all the time. He doesn't have the accessories necessary to do that. So using EP in order to get that was a lot more efficient. So then I had to decide, look through the Graal's Ritter notebook, look up and see, okay, well, what kind of quartz do I need in order to obtain this spell? Okay, well, how likely is it that I can do that? Well, I can synthesize this quartz, which will give me this amount of space and earth, and then I need to make sure that it's on the right line. I can move this quartz around. I have to get rid of this quartz. It really made me engage with the quartz system in a way that I have not engaged with it before, period. Yeah, exactly. I set and forget. I'll come back and I'll say, okay, this attack 2, let's make it an attack 3, or something like that. Or if there's a very specific buff that I like. In the Cold Steel games, for instance, I'll make sure that I have lots of people using La Forte in order to get strength bonuses. But in terms of like really being deliberate, especially with the court system that Sky and the Crossbell games have, I had never engaged with it in this way. And I found it so much more strategically compelling being forced to do that by virtue of the fact that if I didn't, I was not going to be able to beat the boss. And that is precisely what I wanted my decision to play it on hard to turn into. And that's what's happening. And to top it all off, I mean, I'm playing it on stream. So some of you guys are watching me play it. I mean, Pork Bob's watching, Griswo's watching, Kate's watching sometimes, other people as well. And I'm getting advice. I'm getting, like, people are tossing ideas around in chat, and then I can see if it's possible. Try this idea out, try that idea out. It's a completely different way for me to experience the game, and it's fantastic. I'm absolutely loving it.
What it comes down to is being proactive, not reactive, planning out not just this turn, but what roles do they do, should they do I need to change, what chords to accomplish that, where positioning, so on and so forth. It's not button mashing by any means.
Also, what I'm doing, I don't know if I've mentioned this on the podcast, Trails in the Sky the Third has an option where if you retry the boss, it'll weaken the boss. I've removed that option. I have to beat the boss the right way. So there is no pulling a Kevin, or in the case of the last game, pulling a Colin, honestly. This Kevin Graham is not pulling a Kevin. We're beating the bosses right. But it does require us to think through even party composition more strategically. On the final boss was pretty tough. You thought it was tough. It took you said one or two times. I died, what, three times before I decided that we needed a better strategy. Like, it was pretty much kicking my ass. And we tried to think through a couple of different stuff, making sure that more people can revive, making sure that I'm getting more things like soul blurs off. But really, what we identified was that Tita was a weak link. Tita was pretty decent for normal enemies. Her smoke cannon is awesome. I'm liking Vital Cannon. Vital Cannon was also great during the arena boss fight, because the arena boss fight brings your defenses down, but Vital Cannon gets rid of stat changes, or negative stat changes. So she was really useful for that fight. She is not useful for the palace fight. And once you convinced me to take her out and put Joshua in, we had to level Joshua up a little bit. But Phantom Raid helped with the ads so much. He could also deal with ads on his own because of True Double Strike. That was really helpful. He's more durable than Tita.
Yeah, Joshua is an entirely different unit than Tita. Tita was not pulling her weight in the second boss fight. The minute that you switched out Tita for Joshua, got him leveled up, he pulled his weight and then some. It was a bit touch and go for getting rid of the second boss, but we didn't have any issue really.
No, once we made that choice, I managed to beat him. It was kind of cool coming together as a stream to figure that out, but it was quite striking to me how Tita had fallen from being one of my more useful party members to literally dragging me down to the point where I couldn't finish the fight. We had talked about how, Joshua, I put him in, he was great. So obviously putting Joshua in the party was excellent gameplay-wise. I thought it was really cool how strategic I had to be with these bosses, which I hadn't had to have been before. But there's one last aspect about this chapter that we haven't talked about yet, which is the story at the end when we encounter the Lord of Phantasma. Kevin, why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
So we get a name to the ostensible big bad. We don't know if he is the controlling power, but he seems to be the most highest adversary that we've seen thus far. He has the usual defeat the demon. This seems to be a recurring thing. Actually, gotta defeat a demon end of every chapter. But then we get some very interesting dialogue at the end, talking to Kevin Graham. He says, "Poor Kevin Graham, poor pitiful Kevin. Wow, did they copy my parents? Please try not to let me down more than you already have. Damn, it's so good. Poor Kevin Graham, poor pitiful Kevin. Please try to not let me down more than you already have. I am a phantasm, a shadow. Much as a shadow only exists when there is something to cast it, I too only exist because of something within your numbers. Do you grasp my meaning? So, this is clock you on the head, red strobe light blaring. Something key was just revealed to us here in this instance, in this scene. My interpretation is that I don't want to say in Kevin's head, but something connected to Kevin's psyche is the spark for this, and the Lord of Phantasm could be a doppelganger, a physical manifestation of trauma, of some loss, pain, something on that regard. Because this is all but saying he and Kevin are connected. He is Kevin's shadow. I mean, this is pretty blatant in how subtle it is not being.
Right, it's not subtle at all. There are two things that we should kind of keep in mind about this. One is we've seen this figure before. We've seen this figure on the Lusitania during the prologue. He's kind of flickered in and out of existence like once or twice during the prologue, which is interesting. And the second is right after the Lord of Phantasma says this, Kevin has a reaction. You hear kind of like a heartbeat sound, and then for like a second, a black and white image appears. If I remember right, it's of Kevin like holding on to somebody who looks like they're dead.
Oh, I must have forgotten that or something.
You must have, because it happens like that. It does not linger on the screen, but it is there.
Very interesting. But I want to draw attention to I too only exist because of something within your numbers, plural. And I wonder what significance can or should we take from this and not from your number.
I wouldn't put any, like just personally, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that there's any real distinction drawn here between within your number or within your numbers.
Okay, so it's still just this connection with Kevin, basically, and not.
I mean, they're saying it could be anybody within that group. Probably Kevin, given the reaction that he has, but conceivably it could be anybody. Reese is also important. Reese is here from the beginning.
She has been. I think she'll have a part to play, but Kevin had this visceral, like he knew exactly either what was going on or it confirmed a deep suspicion. I don't know what exactly, but Kevin knows much more than he's letting on. Remember, you commented on this trope, how Kevin had some sort of feeling, I think before the final boss fight or something, and how you, on the live stream, you were like, oh, I hate it when people do this. They had this dramatic, mysterious comment of, just as I thought it would be. And like, what is it? And they're like,
Like Kevin makes this reference to how he thinks he knows what's going on, but and I know why storytellers do this, because they want to show that the character is thinking through things, maybe he's figured it out, but they want the reader or they want the player to discover it in a different way than the character did. So it doesn't make much sense for that purpose for the character to turn around and say, "Oh, here's what I think is going on." However, it is far more realistic for the character to say, "Oh, look, here's what's going on," and then you pull it off in a different way. This is going to sound like a bizarre example, and it's slightly out of context, but I think this will demonstrate what I mean. I've been rewatching Brooklyn Nine-Nine lately, which is a sitcom based around a New York City cop police department. And something that I noticed about the jokes and why the show is so high quality is because it will tell a joke based off of somebody else's misunderstanding of a particular word or a particular concept. For example, when Boyle is going to get married, he gives everybody what he calls STDs and what he calls save the dates, when obviously STD means something else. And you could just leave the joke there if you wanted to. But instead, what the showrunners do is they have Boyle realize that it means something different, and then they play off Boyle's reaction to that realization to bring the joke to fruition. And what's really strong about that is that it brings the absurd back to reality and then brings it back to the absurd. And that's what they could do with Kevin here. Instead of building up the mystery by having Kevin say, "Oh, I think I figured out what's going on, but let's see if my suspicions are confirmed." Instead, you could have a discussion about what Kevin's figured out and why he's figured it out, and then let's see if he's correct. And then, if he is correct, give us an interesting conversation between Kevin and the Lord of Phantasma that's maybe even filling in some of the gaps that Kevin hadn't figured out. I think that would have made for much more compelling storytelling.
that was the most convoluted way of explaining that.
I don't know. I like the example. I think it's a good example.
I'm glad at least one person does. Okay, so yes. So I joked in the chat this split second image of what Kevin sees. And I think
Okay.
it's pretty interesting. Because what do we see? It looks like Kevin is supporting someone who was stabbed, a woman, Reese's sister, and or maybe he looks also injured as well. Looks like spikes are coming out of her back, maybe going from Kevin into her.
I don't think I don't think that it's Kevin supporting her. It looks more like not Reese. What's her face? Her sister is protecting him.
Okay, it's tough to see clearly because it's a GIF that goes off and on in a really
Yeah, it's really fucking annoying.
that's the best I could do. But we know Reese's sister is dead. It looks like Reese's sister. So I'm guessing that her death is connected. Maybe there's unexplained or unexamined guilt or such like. I'll say this about Kevin not explaining. What if he died in the fight, or had an aneurysm, or whatever? Like, the secret would have died with him. The thing to do in these situations is, I think I know what's going on, and then explain everything in case, something happens in this very dangerous series of murder trials.
Okay, but interesting hypothetical because your current hypothesis is that the Lord of Phantasma is linked to Kevin. And the Lord of Phantasma says that he only exists because of somebody within their number, which you are identifying with Kevin. So if Kevin dies, doesn't this whole thing go away?
Maybe, but they can't know. One, two, Kevin does not know he is the protagonist. In other words, he does not know there's a very good chance he's supposed to win.
I mean, that's true. To a certain degree, I think stories kind of have to like by the fact that we can establish that there's like 30 more hours in this game or more. It's pretty clear that Kevin's not going to die, and games are built around that, which is why when they kill off a main character successfully, the surprise value is like, oh my god, they actually did it. So I don't necessarily find that to be like a big deal. That what happens if Kevin died? But I do think that the more that Trails is at its strongest when it sticks closest to reality and when it doesn't try to subvert expectations, instead tries to exceed expectations. And this was a moment in which they could have done that, but instead they opted for the trope. And I don't think they should have done that.
No, I think it was a mistake. But we get enough tantalizing hints and information to leave us wanting more. And you know what, Colin?
Well, before you transition to something, because I don't know what you're going to transition to, there's one thing that I want more of, Kevin. What I want more of is Gilbert Stein.
Oh, God. Oh, I forgot about him. We see him a bit in the Grancel chapter section, and we talked briefly about this in the live stream chat. I mean, he does not have much of a personality to begin with, but having him to just be the comically ineffective, we saw that in the beginning, the prologue. We saw that in Josette's Skydor. We see it here. It's just, okay.
See, I love him. I love kind of how over the top and competent he is. So any more screen time that we get for Gilbert Stein, I'm a fan of. But I do think that his presence here raises some interesting questions. Because what do we know so far? We know that Kevin, Reese, and Gilbert were in the same place when they got pulled in. Reese and Kevin were transported to the Hermit's Garden. But according to Gilbert, he found himself waking up in Grancel to find that nobody was there, which means that while he was transported to Phantasma, he was transported to the Grancel part of it. He was not transported to the Hermit's Garden. Also, everybody else who has been transported to Phantasma so far has been transported by means of turning them into summoning stones. And they're found all over. We find people who were in Erebonia, people who were in Crossbell, people who were in Liberl. Gilbert was not put into a summoning stone, probably because he was so close to the artifact that created this. But it's interesting that everybody else is connected to Kevin to the point where everybody that we find becomes playable. They're in the Hermit's Garden, they're in our party. Even Josette is playable. Gilbert maintains his own agency.
I am not going to dignify the creators with some sort of whatever on agency. He's here because he is the designated punching bag comic relief. The only thing larger apparatus I will give is that it's a connection to the society, which up until through now has been almost entirely absent as far as we are aware.
We'll see if there's more Ouroboros or if there's not that much more Ouroboros. Who knows?
I bet I maybe they did this, or maybe they have a way of accessing the alternate dimension because they have shown themselves able to mess with the planes of reality, for lack of a better term.
I will say that I have a theory about Ouroboros' involvement with this. And by theory means that it's not revealed in this game or in other games, but it's something that I've been thinking about. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wait until Trails of Reverie to talk about it. So you're going to have to remind me when we get there to tell you. And I know that you're really mad that I just told you that something leads to something else. He's flicking me off right now, but in a really cartoonish fashion, like with the Jack in the Box, where you're going like, around and around and around to lift up the middle finger. But I'm just saying, I think that there's a connection there. We'll talk about it when we get there. Those who have played Reverie, feel free to DM the Twitter chat so that we can talk about it. And Kevin, don't look at the Twitter chat.
No, sir. You know what I'm going to be looking at, though, Colin?
What are you going to be looking at?
The third chapter of Trails the Third, which the Let's Play tells me is called Golden Road, Silver Road.
So, what predictions do you have for Chapter 3?
I bet it's not something that we've seen before. I bet we'll get at least
Okay.
2 new party members. I'm guessing Chloe and Zin. We've seen doors about them in this chapter. We saw a door for Josette in chapter 1. She came in chapter 2. So maybe it's not a big time jump. It gives us a dedicated mage support who can do. I believe she's better at casting spells than Kevin, offensive ones. Zin gives us a tank to soak up damage. So I bet those are the 2. And Chloe, because it's Grancel. The one that we saw from the Bobcat was Josette. The arena, Joshua. They seem to be connected of a sort. Overall impressions of the chapter, I thought it was good. Overall, I liked it. Was not super fond of the setting. I thought the gameplay made up. It was fun. I enjoyed the challenge. How about you? What's your 15-second summary?
I like the setting. I like asset reuse like this, and I think that the chapter forced me to engage with the systems of this game in a way that I hadn't before. Something that I know you want this to be quick, but we hadn't talked about this, and I want to bring it up. There's a new element where unused party members can give bonuses to your party. And when I played through this last time, basically I just put Josette in there because her Sepith plus 30% drop bonus is amazing. And I set it and forget it. This time, however, part of my strategy for dealing with the final boss was deciding what kind of support I needed. We ended up putting Mueller in there for his increased defense and increased speed. And that's just another decision that the player has to make to give the party the most advantage that they can. And so gameplay-wise, this is probably the most fun I've had since we started this podcast in terms of just getting into the nitty-gritty. And that's been a blast.
And I'm done with thinking, so there's no good transition. I'm Kevin. That's Colin. See you next time.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. Bye-bye.